What's up, everybody? This is the late night edition of Manifest Mondays. I have had an extremely long day, but I could not let this day go without a message. Some of y'all saw my story, and you know I'm here to talk about how people like to change the narrative when it suits them. And I want to kind of explain how that happens, why that happens, in particular regarding kind of certain circumstances that we're going through currently. And my hope all the time with Manifest Mondays is, how are we looking at ourselves, reflecting, and constantly getting better over time? And as life happens, there's always a little message. Things always happen, and I'm like, oh, guess that's what I'm going to talk about this week. So y'all, what's up? How you doing? Happy Monday. Do me a favor, send this to your friends. Definitely was not planning to come on this late tonight, but you know what? We still need to do what we got to do. And I can't do Manifest Mondays on Tuesday, right? So today I want to talk to y'all about confirmation bias. Not just that, I want to just talk about cognitive bias altogether. So if you saw my story, I don't know if it'll still be up here by the time you guys watch this, but I reposted this line about how sometimes people will try to make you the evil one. They try to make you out to be the bad guy because it's easier for them to deal with whatever it is that they did to you, right? And a lot of that, I realize, goes back to how our brains operate. And our brains will do so much to protect us, right? Anything that makes us feel uncomfortable, anything that we don't want to deal with, our brain will literally rewrite the narrative for us so that we don't have to deal with it. So we can validate it, so we can feel good in whatever it is that we're doing. And these are called cognitive biases, right? Cognitive meaning our thoughts, right? How our brain works, how we come up with our rationale, our logic. And bias, right, is how we are swayed in that perspective one way or another. A lot of times we are not aware of these things happening. They are happening in our subconscious, meaning our level of awareness isn't there. It's happening automatically. This is our brain's way of protecting us. And the examples are so far and wide, and there's so many different ways that this shows up. So I want to kind of talk about that a little bit and manifest for us, just as we continue to heal and grow as people, that we become more aware of when we're doing this to others and when it's being done to us. Because when you start to understand these things, you take a lot of things less personal, and it's overall better for your mental health. So one of the biggest things that I think I recognize right now, and that some of us in the diaspora can see very clearly, is kind of the labeling that we in Tigray get as rebels, being called terrorists, like all of these ridiculous things. And it's just beyond me, right? Like, it's really, really beyond me. And I think a lot of us are frustrated by that. Like, how are we rebels because we're fighting for our basic rights? You know? You're labeling us a terrorist for what purpose? You know? And when you understand how cognitive biases work, you can start to see how these narratives get flipped and switched. But also, even in your personal lives, right? Like, let's take it down to a very basic example. You break up with somebody, okay? And all of a sudden, you went from loving this person to they are the most absolute horrible person. You hate them. Everything they do annoys you, you know? And that's literally our brain's way of protecting us, because we will now focus on the one bad thing about them. And there's something called confirmation bias, where you are now going to look for everything bad about that person to reaffirm how you feel. Yeah, so got to like self-defense. Absolutely is self-defense. And confirmation bias shows up in so many ways, in so many scenarios. And it's really fundamentally our way of keeping things the same and keeping ourselves safe. So in the examples that I'm giving, like starting with how people get labeled, it's just a way to continue to feel good and safe about yourself, right? So if I label like Tigrayan's rebels and I label them terrorists, then it's very easy for me to justify all the treatment that they're getting, right? Because of course they deserve that, because they're this, and the third. And that kind of bias shows up all the time, all of the time, where instead of like taking a second to pause and think, we're just gonna go with that because it's much easier. It's like, nope, I already knew they were a bad person. See, they do this, they do that, and you're just trying to find anything to confirm what you already feel about somebody, instead of actually taking the time to get to know them, because that would require so much effort. And a lot of the times when our brains are doing this, it's really just a quick way of assessing situations. That's why I said it happens in your subconscious, not in your conscious mind. But in your subconscious, it's much easier to use a stereotype, right? It's much easier to go off of the very little information you have to form an opinion quickly, because your brain's job is to protect you. And it has to assess, is this person a danger or not? And based off of that, they're going to build the narrative. So I hope this is starting to paint a picture. And there's a ton. So you can literally Google cognitive bias, right? And there's a laundry list of ones that will pop up. I have a couple pulled up. The one I was talking about is confirmation bias, because that one shows up a lot. But also there's in-group bias. And we have that where you are more likely to support, right? Defend people that are in your group, in your social circles, because of that idea that you guys are in the same group, and that you're not going to see them objectively. You're going to base your predictions or your assessment of them off of your personal relationship with them. So an example of this is like, we all have really great friends, right? But sometimes they're not the best workers, right? Like, they might not be the most timely people, it might not be the easiest people to work with, etc., etc. But because we love them in our capacity of how we know them, we will like use that as an excuse to kind of not hold them accountable in other areas of our life. And that in-group, out-group situation happens quite a lot, okay? This is a good one. Self-serving bias. An assumption that things happen to us when we've done all the right things, that good things happen to us, and things that are bad or things that are like poor outcomes for us, we blame on outside, like external factors, right? And that is definitely self-serving, because you take all the glory but none of the accountability. You're not responsible for anything bad that happened. Anything bad that happened couldn't possibly be your fault, and you can find a million excuses. I don't know if that sounds familiar to anybody. You know anybody like that? I know a couple. I like to call it playing the victim. But again, that's a thing, right? I love what got to in here commented. Yeah, some people got some lazy friends who are definitely not accountable. And as a friend, it is our job to tell them about themselves, right? You have like availability bias. You have, you're only basing like your opinion on somebody with the information you have, right? You're only using what's available to you or what you can remember. An example of this too is like when you get evaluations. So if you are at a job and you do like quarterly evaluations or yearly evaluations, whatever it is, people only tend to remember the first thing and the last thing that you did. Everything in the middle could have been fantastic, right? But they'll only focus on those things that they can recall quicker and what information is available to them. That's also why it's very important for you to write down all of the things. HR emails you all the time. Your bosses always follow up in writing, because they are not going to remember all of that. So they're going to go back to their files. So this is also a little tip for you. Keep track of things, because you yourself will forget all of the amazing things that happen in the middle, because it's all jumbled up mush, right? Unless it was a spectacular, amazing thing, we will tend to just use what we can remember in that moment. Fundamental attribution error, okay? This one cracks me up because we do this all the time, where when the example is like, when it's you, right, you attribute things to like external factors, like, or you just assume the best in yourself. But if somebody else were to do the same thing, you assume that it's because they're just a horrible person. So for instance, you're like, okay, let's be real, I'm not even gonna say we, right, as Habesha people, as melanated people in this planet, are really bad at time management. Okay, we were always gonna be late. I have gotten it down to a 10-minute rule, where I try, like, if I'm gonna be more than 10 minutes, like, bro, I can't even hold it. Like, I gotta just gotta be honest with people. But we don't assume that we're horrible people. We might be like, oh, there's traffic, or there's this, or, you know, like, we'll try to make it like not a big deal. But say somebody else is late for showing up or whatever, we will go off the rails, like, I can't believe they would do this to me, they're such a horrible person, like, they don't care about my time, and right? And we do that all the time. And what I will say is the cure for that is to have empathy all the time. Is to have empathy. Yep, we got to put it in there. Ask for grace, right? But we do, yeah, so we ask for grace, but we judge others. But really, if we can be empathetic and put ourselves in other people's positions, a lot of these biases go away, right? It really does. Empathy, self-awareness, right? First, you have to be aware that these things are happening. You have to be aware that you are moving this way, right? That these cognitive biases exist, and they are a lot of times the reason why we have ourselves or find ourselves in conflict, you know, with others, because we're thinking in a way to protect ourselves and not necessarily to understand the other person and to be a caring and loving person, even though we want that same treatment. So first thing is, make sure that you're self-aware, that you understand that these things exist. And then you got to do this really difficult thing where you have to question yourself. You actually have to challenge your beliefs. A lot of times we just say things and we don't actually know where they come from, right? We're just like, oh, like, oh, good example, okay? And I'm gonna be in some people's feelings, but this is what I'm here for. I'm here to challenge us. In our community, a lot of times you'll ask a question, okay? For instance, there's I had this argument this weekend. I'm not gonna name any names, but I had a couple of these arguments this weekend. As some of you have seen, or I don't know if I put on my personal page, but my aunt just had a newborn baby, cute as hell, okay? Sweetest little thing. But it's bringing up the conversation of godparents in our community. And there is this age-old thing. I don't know if everyone follows it or understands it, right? But there's this like practice where people say, oh, if you are related to the child, you can't be a godparent. And I'm also speaking from a Christian Orthodox perspective, so other people feel free to educate me on how it is for other religions. But this is something that I'm constantly being told, right? Is, oh, like, if you're related to the child, you can't be the godparent. And a lot of times people will use like culture, religion, or whatever, the two, because those two get mixed up all together, and they'll say, oh, you can't, it's in the Bible, or you can't, it's against our culture. And I always am like, okay, well, explain that to me. Like, where does that thought process come from? And I'll get pushback all the time where it's like, it's just the way it is. Hello? have you met me? I never followed this. This is just the way it is. Like, I'm the type of person, like, if you can't explain it to me, if it don't have no logic, if it don't have no reasoning, I'm not just going to blindly follow, right? But sometimes in our culture, or just the way that our people have moved from time to time, is that you don't really question authority. You just do what you're told. And when I challenge that belief, I always get met with pushback. I have been called a lot of different things, and it's hurtful. And I've gotten to the place where I'll tell people, no, you're wrong. That's hurtful, that's rude, that's offensive. I'm simply asking you a question. I'm not telling you you're wrong. I'm literally, in this moment, challenging us to challenge our beliefs, right? Well, God says in here, like, it's not in the Bible. It's really not, y'all. It's really not. I feel like I'm stepping on toes, but this is what it feels like when you challenge beliefs. You actually have to. You have to think about, where does this thinking come from? Where did I learn this? Is this rooted in anything that I can stand on? You know, because if it's flimsy, it's not going to hold its weight anywhere, right? And I'm not telling people your religion is wrong or whatever. I'm literally asking, where does this logic come from? Because if you can give me the reasoning for it, I'm behind it 100%. I'm like, all right, cool. That's what it is. That's what it is, right? But it's more so a tradition, a practice that people have come up with over time to try to, like, build more community and closeness within one another, from my understanding. It's really not any religious belief. Like, for you to be the godparent of a kid, it has nothing to do with if you're related or not, right? And so that's just one example of, like, let's challenge our beliefs. Let's challenge what we're doing, not for the sake of, like, I don't like this thing and let's throw it away, but it's like, are we following rules that make sense? You know, like, are they logical? Do we actually believe in them? Or are we just doing what is the status quo, which is another bias, actually. There is a status quo bias. Let me see if I can pull it up. Where essentially, like, people just want to stay in what's familiar and what's comfortable. And anything that changes that is a threat to their way of living. Because, again, we're hardwired to stay in our comfort zone, because that is where we feel safe. So whenever that gets challenged, especially in our community, the way that respect is usually given to the elders, but not given back to the younger members of the culture, anytime you question them, it comes off as disrespect in their mind. And that's why we constantly have these issues. But if you understand that it's really just their brain protecting them, you can have more empathy. And maybe we can change the way that we ask the question or whatever the case is. But at least you understand why there's that resistance. Because it's just difficult for us to challenge and change. Change is like the hardest thing. Like, it's so weird because it's the one thing that is consistent, that always happens. But it's also the one thing that fundamentally we don't like to do. You know, like, if we don't have the information, if we don't know what's coming next, it's just really uncomfortable for us. And a lot of that is happening below the surface. And sometimes you're just like, I don't know why, like, I get triggered or I'm mad or whatever. And it's like, take a second to breathe. Take a second to remember that this is happening purely because your brain is trying to protect you. You know, and it helps you to not take it so personal, right? And it also gives you a second to be like, wait, let me reflect on this. Let me think, like, okay, like, I've been operating under, you know, faulty logic or whatever the case is. Like, I can move past this. Or in the case where somebody is trying to label you a certain way, like how we're feeling in Tigray, or when you've broken up with somebody, or when it can even be in your friend groups, right? Y'all know how that happens. You have beef with somebody and all of a sudden, she's always that way, I hate her. Like, you know, we have all this negativity about it. And you can take a second to be like, wait, hold on. That person isn't completely bad or completely good. We're all flawed. We all have differences. Is this one that I can live with? or is this one that I need to walk away from, right? And we can handle these conversations a lot better, but it does take a level of self-awareness. It does take a level of being willing to be wrong, right? Being willing to explore our belief system, and just being open to all of that, and having empathy. Having empathy goes a long, long way in making our communication better with folks. And that's really what I want to manifest for all of us, because as a community, as we're growing and becoming better, these are the things that we have to gripe with. These are the things that we have to start to understand and have conversation around, because I see so many of the time that we're getting hung up on these things, right? We're bringing in our personal issues with people, or we heard this thing about someone and now we question, or we're looking at them sideways for everything else, right? Or vice versa, where you think this person is so amazing, because there's also this halo effect that happens too, or that first impression effect, where you met someone for the first time and you thought they were so amazing, and then they do something that you're not really in agreement with. You start making excuses for those people, and then we stop holding people accountable, because we're they could never, why would they ever? And then you have this whole transition of being disappointed and frustrated because that person is not behaving in the way that you assume they should, because you're still going based off that first impression you had of them. And that also creates a lot of tension and issues for us, right? Because either you're not holding the person accountable and you're making all types of excuses for them, or you're so devastated because you put this person on a pedestal, and how could they wrong you like that? And it's no, you made a judgment call and an assumption on somebody's entire character and personality, and you're assuming how they're going to show up based off of the very little information you have of them. So I'm really hoping and praying and manifesting for us that we can start to tackle some of these issues in our community, within ourselves first, right? And start to get a clear understanding of who we are, how our brains work, and how we're showing up in the world. Because all of that is affecting how we treat other people. And the way we treat each other right now is not amazing. The current state of the world is not amazing. And I feel a lot of that has to do with the fact that people really don't understand how their brain works. And the more you do, the easier it becomes for you to actually show up better, to be kinder, to be more empathetic, and to put more light and love into the world. And that's what I really want to manifest for us. I'm gonna see it. I see a couple of y'all writing in the comments. Yes. Oh, yes. Going back to the godparent thing. Yep. Reasoning that they tell us that we can't be related to the kid and be the godparent is that they want to get support from the family, from outside of the family. Again, right? Sometimes I'll be y'all politicking way too much off of this. To me, this is just my opinion. I'm choosing the person that I actually think is going to show up for my child. God forbid something happens to me. I want to know that the person I chose can step in and support my kid, But again, that's me. Y'all do what you want. Yes, they do get very mad at us when we ask questions. And a lot of the time, I'm always I used to just write it off they just don't know the answer. And half the time, they really don't. I'm not even gonna lie. Half the time, people have not ever challenged themselves, right? They've never had anybody ask them why. They themselves probably got the same reaction when they asked why, and they probably got the answer, that's just the way it is. That's the one thing that irritates the hell out of me. When people tell me that's just the way it is, I'm that's a cop-out. That's a lazy excuse. What? No. Give me more. Let's unpack this. And if you can't, then I'm going to go find a different answer. Or I'm going to find an answer on my own. And that's currently what our generation has done. We have gone out and tried to find our own answers and all of these things. And we circling around when we could have just had an open conversation with one another. All right, you don't know. Let's figure this out together. Let's do some research. Let's read, some type of book, right? Or let's ask somebody who does have that information. Oh man, Mugata has me weak. He said I asked a question to my grandma once when I was a kid and I got slapped and yelled at and never did it again. Yes, literally every first generation kid has experienced this. Oh my God. Yes. And you know I love you so much, Mugata. I will always tackle these things in our community. It is so wild, right? But honestly and truly, if we want to end up in a better place, if we want to see our next generation actually thrive and ourselves actually thrive, these are the things we got to understand about our brain. These are the things that we need to teach the next generation as well. And this is part of our emotional intelligence. You know, people like to throw that out and they don't actually know what that means. Like, this is the work you have to do. You have to pause and think and check yourself. What do they say? You better check yourself before you wreck yourself. Okay. Some of y'all might know that reference. If you don't, I'm aging myself. But that really is. And if you can't, have an accountability partner as well. Somebody that you will allow to check you. Because we all need that. We all need someone to tell us when we tripping. And trust me, my friends do not hold back. It's sometimes very uncomfortable. But you do not get change by staying in your comfort zone. And that's what we need. Because I don't know about y'all, but I'm not trying to be in the same place 30 years from now. I'm not trying to be fighting another war. I'm not trying to have petty beef with people. For what? For why? Like, it don't got to be that hard. Life don't got to be that difficult. We really don't need to have this much miscommunication. So that's what I'm manifesting for us. Also, just a couple quick announcements before I hop off of here. If you have not, please go and subscribe to my YouTube channel. The link is in my bio, Uprooted Network everywhere, on all of the socials. But really and truly, go subscribe on YouTube. I'm going to upload everything's already uploaded there, but I'm going to upload the Manifest Mondays on there as well. I'm finishing out the last 2 episodes of Summer with Zoo. It's been such a therapeutic but also difficult season for me to do, because missing my sis Zuhair is a roller coaster. But I feel her with me all the time. And so I have to do purple on my nails because I miss my sis. And as I'm going into this next season of how do I show up for community, that's how I plan out seasons, by the way. It's like, how do I show up for community? What am I seeing and what do we need? I hear Zoo, I feel Zoo, and I'm going to start getting emotional, so I'm not going to get too deep into it. But my sis is always with me, and honoring her through this season has been very beautiful and difficult, but I hope that it's been healing others, especially if you've lost a dear friend, that, you know, you can talk about it, that you can grieve with your friends and their memory doesn't have to go away. So keep looking out for those. There's gonna be 2 more to close out the season. And then last 2 announcements, I have decided to relaunch the Create Your Joy course, all about like getting yourself together. It's a life management course, trying to give people these basic fundamentals to start their healing journey. And in honor of my sweet sis, I have completely slashed the price to $24 in honor of the 24 years of her life, because her birthday just passed this July. So I want to show up in community the best way that I can, and my heart and my intention is always to provide for us the resources that we never had in a sustainable fashion. So that will be relaunching, as well as a mental health series on the book The Body Keeps the Score, because I also see how much we're suffering right now, how many people's health has been declining, and the fact that they're not understanding the relationship to stress and physical ailments that you're dealing with in life. So that will be coming really soon. And I just want y'all to know, and what I'm really manifesting for all of us is so much healing, love, and light, and that we get to thrive as a community. So y'all, thank you for sticking with me, for holding me down. and for holding us down, because Uprooted is for us, by us. And I might be the face, I might be the founder, but I'm not going to be the only one to carry on this vision. So I love y'all. I hope you had a beautiful weekend. I hope that you didn't do labor on Labor Day. And just keep on holding on and keep on loving on each other, because that's the only way we move forward. So happy Monday, y'all. Peace out.